Hi, I'm Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is my video of how I painted our Christmas. Do you have a favorite park? Can you imagine coming upon a decorated Christmas tree right in the middle of it? Wouldn't that be a surprise? I received a Christmas tree commission painting, and when I completed it, it was very well liked by a lot of people, and that made me really happy. One of the people who saw it was my art patroness, and she asked if I could paint the little decorated tree in a nearby park setting that she really was fond of, called Kemper Park. Yes, I could, and that request became our Christmas. I hope you like it. Now let's paint. I had a photographic reference from a picture I took while in the park, and I thought it really made some good sense to use it because it had a perfect location for a Christmas tree. I began by making a quick sketch and then wetting down the background. All along the horizon line, I touched in some pretty purple colors. And then I came in and gave a basic yellow outline where I wanted my sunshine burst to be. Cobalt blue was next. And remember, everything is very wet here, except for the middle of the sun. Now this is the fun part for me. I like to make distant trees. These are the ones on the other side of the stream, where there's a nice section of forest. So working wet on wet is a fun way to paint. Even in the wintertime, there's some vestiges of color, and I like to pull out all these pretty colors. When the paper begins to dry just a little bit, you can begin to bring in some branches too, and they'll fade out and get blurry, just like distant trees would. Sometimes I'll also turn my brush around and use the handle to scratch into the wet paint to make some distant tree trunks. So I've used burnt sienna, hooker's green dark, some purple lake, and some indigo for the darker colors in this scene. I've also brought in some ultramarine blue. And I continue to fill in the trees until the forest looks sort of thick over there. And I could bring in some bare trees and branches to fill in. The pine trees add a little splash of color in a drab winter scene. Next, I soften that horizon line with some damp brush blending. So it's not all hard. I would like it to look soft like a natural landscape, and in the distance, edges do lose their sharpness. A little bit of yellow ochre and some more purple lake. Add a distant tree and bush line color along the horizon. And now I begin to soften the outline around the sun and extend some of the rays outward. I'm doing this with damp brush and paper towel blotting. Softening the edges, bringing out some rays by extending the dampness into the color that's down and then blotting it off. I'm bringing a little color up toward the center as well. So the sun is not just one big white blob, but looks like it's radiating out in a sunburst. It's taking a lot of blending and a lot of tweaking. But the sunburst is such a cheerful part of this particular subject, and it needs to be done right. So it takes me a good amount of time to get it that way. Next step involves doing some more clarity on the distant trees. These would be trees that are growing right along the edge of the water being the Neshaminy Creek here. So they're coming in a little more clearly. I'm using a very thin brush, which allows me to get some thin branch work. And these are growing over on top of and through the sun rays. So I'm trying to use some delicacy in how I present them. Colors get bleached out as they go toward the sun in a photograph. Sometimes they even turn a little purple or pink. Since those colors are so pretty in a winter landscape, I make sure that I use them. So some Quin magenta and some Quin purple, or violet, excuse me. Now I'm planning out the rest of the composition and starting on the stream. This stream is running at the time, it's not frozen. And it's doing a lot of reflecting from both the light and from the distant trees in the shore bank. I don't want the stream to be a focal point in this painting. So I'm trying to give the feeling of water and streakiness and some reflective color into it. And then I will let it just fade into doing what it wants to do. I may also reflect some trees into it, but I'll keep them light and not too developed. And here again, I am working wet on wet. If you have trouble overpainting and you want to keep an area white, like the close-up snowbank I'm painting toward, you might want to use some masking. Sometimes when I overpaint, I could take a damp brush and just gently remove the extra paint with some water and some blotting. But when you're painting and you're all excited, sometimes you forget where you wanted to not have any paint. Next step for me is to mark in the path that goes along the stream where everybody likes to walk and look at the water, look at the wildlife. There's kingfisher birds, mallard ducks, there's deer. I even saw a big water turtle swimming there once. It's a beautiful park. A lot of residents in the area enjoy Kemper. Painting in tight around the little Christmas tree, developing some distant trees that are going through the sunburst, but in a very pale, washed out color. And I think the water's working just right too. taking some masking fluid, and I'm painting it around the edge of the tree so I can work without thinking too much about over-painting and going into the tree. Keep it clean. And now I begin on some shadowy snow slopes of the path. I'm using a mixture of blue, Payne's gray, and purple. I'm marking in the perspective of the path and how it goes back into the composition and then around a curve. I'm putting in some furrows where people have walked or pushed a cart or a sled, and structuring out the little hillside by the water. And there's some lovely trees growing off of that. But first I'm painting the ground that the trees will be coming out of. And here comes the trees growing. First the distant ones, and then I'll move closer as I go. When I'm painting a tree on a hillside or a little slope, I make sure I slant the trunk because that reflects the slant of the slope. Try saying that 5 times fast. For the trees, I'm using a mixture of sepia, Payne's gray, and some indigo. As the trees move closer to the sun, I'm adding more purple to the trees, as well as more ultramarine blue. Because again, the sun is washing out the color. I've not sketched the trees in, but I am working directly from my photograph reference, which shows all the trees there. I have not painted every tree in the photograph, and that is an artist's choice. If you don't want to do everything you see, then you don't have to. You do what looks right to your eye and for the composition. Keep in mind, if you're painting over a colored ground, the paint has to be dark enough to cover what's behind it, because you can't have the background showing through see-through, because they're not ghost trees. You can remove some color by a damp brush and blotting, if that's needed for a light reflection. But when a tree is going right in front of the sun like this, it's usually mostly in silhouette and all dark. I've continued to develop the branches on the trees in the foreground. I've also made them dark with several glazes of more color to make them really stand out. And I'm playing around with how this big two-parted tree in the foreground plays in and out of the sun rays. It makes for a sort of a dramatic effect. Back into the sun rays themselves and making my trees faded and showing through the rays. I'm using my Quin magenta here along with purple to show that washed out sun-glazed color that's in the middle of a sunburst or a sun flare from a photograph. Because face it, you can't look at the sun and see the color directly because you'll hurt your eyes. The camera will do it for you though. Try it, just stand and look right at the sun with your camera, but not your eyes, and snap a couple shots. Or maybe you already have. It's a fun way to get a good photograph. Now I am putting the masking on the tree for all the little ornaments and balls. And I was looking at my reference picture of a tree that I had taken out of a magazine. The trunk's painted on. I'm softening my edge along the snowbank on the left. Continuing to work with those trees going through the sun rays. And when the masking's dry, I'll begin on the Christmas tree. And now it's time for the tree. I begin with the lightest, most golden colors that pines could be if they were touched by the sunlight. So I'm using yellow. Sap green is coming in next. And last will be the hooker's green. To get really good and dark, I'll mix the hooker's green with indigo. I use indigo a lot in my paintings. It's good to darken colors without adding a note of black. Black can look very dead in a natural landscape painting. It definitely has its places in art, but I'm cautious when I'm using it. Painting around the tree, trying to show the boughs and the branches lighter on top, and then with the darker zigzaggy line underneath, darker on the right hand side of the tree and lighter on the left because of the sun's location. And when that dries, I take off the masking. As you recall, I masked all around the edges to keep the background from creeping in, but now I've got to paint back over it where I don't have the ornaments hanging and incorporate it into the background so it looks natural. I'm using a combination of adding more paint and softening and blending the paint already on the tree and moving it outward. I'm also softening the background by wetting that down and letting it creep into the branches and in between them, so all the edge is lost. And it becomes a tree in a landscape and not on one. When I'm painting, I'm usually feeling very happy. I'm feeling the energy of the painting. I'm thinking about what I'm doing, thinking about making it look beautiful and get the light effects that I just want to get. Do you have feelings like that? Does painting make you happy? Or most of the time? Certainly get frustrated sometimes and rather unhappy. But that's how it goes, huh? I begin the colors of the ornaments next. And that makes me feel really happy. As I'm painting these little balls in, I'm also smoothing out the edges and making them look nice and round. Some of the balls I am leaving totally white, like they're sparkling little white lights. And I'm making sure to use a lot of red or pink or crimson balls because they stand out nicely in a winter colored scene. And they're a big part of the holiday. After I paint all the little balls and lights that I'm satisfied with, I soften the edges on some of them by painting around with water and then doing a little blot to make them look like they're more luminous and not so hard-edged. This is the fine balance between softening the edges and removing the color. So that is rather time consuming as well. Now for the shadows. Shadows are fun. I've got to find the angle to get them across the snow according to where the sun is behind them. And they add a lot to the painting when they're done right. After the tree shadow is on, I decided to add a little bit of glows of color from some of the ornaments onto the snow. You'll see me do that at some point. And I think it added a little something special for color into that white and blue snow there on the right. I've put the shadows down and now I'm making them a little darker, trying to keep the color soft on the edges. But also use the dynamic lines, the diagonals, to add drama to the picture. Those little glows I was speaking of might have gotten added later, but you could see them on the photograph for the heading. There they are. A little bit of red, a little bit of pink, a little bit of yellow. Signing my name and I'm done. I hope you enjoyed my video, Our Christmas. And I'm dedicating this particular video to my art patroness, Maria. Thank you, Maria. It would be great if you'd hit a thumbs up and ring the bell in the links below. If you subscribe, you won't miss any future videos. There's also some links below to check out my Facebook art page, my Fine Art America product page, my blog, and also some products that I like to use. I'm wishing each and every one of you a very happy holiday season. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.